It's a bit loud, Barbara.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm Phil Quinn, and this is episode, is it 4? Yeah, episode 4 of Behind the Cycle, and the most exciting one to date, but also tinged with great sadness. You'll be able to see if you're watching on YouTube that we have a very special guest in Barbara Edmonds, the new Labor Finance Spokesperson and MP for the great unrivaled seat of Mana. And we'll be talking with her, with Barbara, about portfolio-related matters shortly. But first, I think it's appropriate and fitting that we pay tribute to the loss of Efeso Collins, who both Barbara and the other face you'll see if you're watching on video, Shane DePoe, both of whom had a long-standing, in Barb's case, I think going back to university. Am I right in saying that? With this lost champion of South Auckland, who I can't claim to have had a friendship with him, but we were on friendly speaking terms, and I always admired his approach, particularly when he was representing South Auckland so staunchly, so reliably, so empathically as a city councillor, to me, modelling what I think a city councillor can and should be. But that's perhaps a discussion for another time. We'll begin with perhaps Barb. Tell us a little bit about your experiences with Efeso Collins and your sense of what his loss means, what his life and legacy are. It was clearly profoundly impactful across the country.
Yes, talofa lava, Phil and Shane. Whakatae te lava mole ava noa. So thank you for the opportunity to come on today. Efeso whanana, Efeso Collins, or Fez, as some of us knew him, an amazing man. I sort of sat there in his memorial service at the Dewdrop Centre, which was filled to the brim. And you look around and there are so many people from so many different parts of his life, and everyone had a special moment or a story that they could share between us who were sitting there in the crowd and those who were sharing on the stage of his impact and his real alofa for people. Alofa as in his love and his aroha and his selflessness. I've known Fez since university days. Fez was the man on campus. So I was introduced to him by one of our mutual friends. And basically he was a couple of years older than me in respects to where he was. He was starting his master's at the time. And it's really unusual to have a student politician that looks like Fez, who was sort of cut right across all the different parts of university, and I'm at the law school, but I know this Masters of Arts student who's basically who could basically hold a crowd, with his words. So I've been really fortunate that we managed to reconnect as part of his mayoralty run. That was decades later, but I kept an eye on Fez because you could see him, just the work that he was doing and the profile he was giving to South Auckland, the struggles they had, and trying to make things easier for his community. He had a rare quality that he could cut through mainstream media to bring those messages. So, it's been an overwhelming week, I think, for a lot of us, particularly in the Pacific community. Obviously not as overwhelming as it is for his family, his Fia and the girls. And so, there's a loss of a great man, but like what Fia said, the way we can honour his legacy is to keep that fight going.
Yeah. Shane, reflect on your experiences.
Tēnā kōrua, nami kia koutou. Well, I didn't know Efeso as well or for a long period as Barbara did. He came to my attention about 10 years ago when he started to become active in Labour Party South Auckland. Was on a board, and I just happened to sort of been pulled into a hui in South Auckland, and I was just overwhelmed by the graciousness, the oratory skills, of the guy. He held the room. Look, I want to be honest. I was a bit suspicious of him. I'm very, I've always been very liberal. All sorts of issues, including rainbows issues. I heard that he was conservative on the issues, but after I caught it all with him that night, if not that night, soon after, I found there was a lot more to the guy. Then I got very active in his mural campaign. I feel a bit sad, actually, about Efeso and the Labour Party. I'm sad that we didn't find him a home, but the Greens did, and I thank the Greens for that. One of the themes of the beautiful memorial service that was held yesterday was square peg. And, in terms of the Labour Party, Efeso was a bit of a square peg, but I think the challenge for people who are more active in the Labour Party than I am in 2024 is make way, man, because I tell you what, Efeso's generation and the generation coming up are very, very special. The speakers, the depth of their analysis, the way in which they delivered the speeches, not only in content but style delivery yesterday was amazing. And if I was the leader of the Labour Party and was there, I'd be saying to my people, we've got to talk to these folks. We've got to get them in, because you know what? They are the way of the future. We are the way of the future. My kids are, and we've got to get on board that. If we don't, they'll go elsewhere and be lost to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, reflecting on Efeso's change of party late as it turned out, tragically late in his life, it's striking how even rabid partisans like you and me, Shane, right?
Yeah.
We're not generally well disposed to people that shift from our party to any other, let alone the Greens. But I couldn't summon any resentment towards him. I still liked and admired him as much before he left the party, after he left the party as much as I had before. There was something deeply ecumenical about him. And frankly, he embodied, you hear a lot about, when you hear the term Christian politician, you immediately think, they're coming for our privacy, they're coming after us. But Efeso Collins embodied a Christ-like Christianity that is you don't find with Christian conservatives. It was a brand of just genuinely deeply humane, caring, humble, leadership, servant leadership. I think he really embodied that, and for that reason he'll be missed. And when you think about where Efeso could have gone, the answer is, well, where couldn't he have gone?
Yeah.
I was thinking, what a Governor General he would have been. Whatever party he landed in. There's no, because he really stood for the best of his community and the best of our country, I think. And so for that reason, it's still it's a deeply sad and tragic loss. But as you say, hopefully his generation and those coming behind him and Barb, from Pacifica community, but from other migrant communities, from Māori, young New Zealanders generally, hopefully they model themselves after his style of politics rather than some of the more abrasive approaches that are more common these days. But thank you so much, both of you, for reflecting on those very personal things. And I gather that the service yesterday was jam-packed, chockers, emotional roller coaster for everyone, from what I could gather. The newsreader on.
It was very fizz, like in the way that you walked in and they had a Christian band there, they had one of the choirs there. It was a real what we'd say in a Christian sense, a praise and worship type of event. And it was, there was a lot of reflection, but at the same time, a lot of those songs were there to comfort people as well. So I think that when you talk about the way of Efeso's Christianity, it comes back to that value, that very Christian value of loving thy neighbour.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's very much that value of being able to look after people as if you'd look after your own. And and it was said a number of times, he just wanted to be able to, the world that his girls grew up in, his queens would grow up in, he wanted that available to everyone.
Of course, yeah. And that shone through in everything he did.
Hey, Phil, can I just, if I can, just say this, that, yesterday and on Monday, I went to the tangihanga on Monday, and then what we call the nihu, which is sort of the last day yesterday, and I know that there's a very private family day today, and I'm pleased about that. But we were there to celebrate the end of somebody's life, Efeso Collins, but actually I thought it was life affirming. I went away feeling better about myself, better about our community, and having more hope. I'm deeply sad, but I didn't leave that tangihana yesterday feeling sad. I felt motivated, and yeah, I thought it was life affirming, which is, at most tangihana you don't feel like that. You feel deeply sad and in grief, but that wasn't my emotion that I had yesterday.
I'm pretty sure if Efeso could hear that, he would be over the moon. That was the feeling that people left his memorial with, because that was what he was about. And it's without getting morbid, it's sad, but as you say, he lived a life that can inspire others to community and public service in a myriad of ways, including politically. And we need to do what we can to honour that.
And Phil, what we do know as labour rights, the staunchest of the staunch of labour people, whether it be trade unionists or the political wing of the Labour Party, are Pacifica, sisters and brothers, the staunchest of the staunch. And even if you have a look at the last election, they'd rather stay home. And this, I think, was a strategic vote. They just didn't feel inspired enough to vote for us, but they could not bring themselves to vote for anybody else. They are the staunchest of our staunch.
Yeah, I don't know if I had $1 for every time a Nat has told me that, the Pacific community are coming our way. I'm like, okay, well, just let me know when that happens, will you? Yeah. But having said that, loyalty is great, but Barb, you've got to deliver, right? You've got to deliver. Yeah. So that brings us nicely to perhaps a broader discussion. And to start with, the post this morning had a profile of Barb, which was, 3,000 words. Would that be about right? It was a very long piece by Luke Malpass. I thought it was an excellent survey of your life and views. For many people listening and watching, paywall might be an issue in terms of being able to access it, although we will provide a link. So perhaps if you could just give us a brief minute or two on that extraordinary journey of your life to date, so that people can work out who is this Barb Edmonds of whom we speak.
Oh, thanks, Phil. 1 minute, okay.
2 minutes. No, that's just a turn of phrase.
So very much, I'm very much the migrant dream, right? My parents came to New Zealand, 1976, the land of milk and honey, from Samoa, to give me and my siblings a better life. And this is a Labour policy, through the ability to capitalise their family scheme benefit. They bought their first home on Auckland's North Shore. It's a Walter Nash policy. Yeah. And my dad, my mum passed away 10 years later when they arrived, and she was diagnosed with cancer when she was pregnant with me, and she died when I was 4. And my 5th birthday was not a party, and it was burying our mum. So, my father made a conscious choice that he wanted to be there for his children, and also had to work through his grief. He was only 40 years old with 4 children under the age of 11. So he went on the domestic purposes benefit. He brought us up until I got to college. He went and retrained to be a social worker. And, the choice that he made to basically bring us up on Auckland's North Shore rather than South Auckland, where they had settled, was very much about schools and education. Dad was the eldest of 18 children. My grandfather had 2 big families. Yeah, wow. And my dad is the only one that went past 4th form to school. He finished and got a diploma in horticulture. So I went to an amazing all-girls Catholic school in one of the richest areas of the North Shore in Milford. I went to a school where basically girls could do anything. That's what we were taught and what we believed. Went to, bits and pieces, worked in an insurance company, went to university, got pregnant in my 2nd year of my law degree with my eldest daughter, Acacia. My husband, who was working as a timber machinist in a factory, we made a conscious decision that we were going to continue my study so that it was an investment in our family future. So, did my law and arts degrees 5.5 years later, was pregnant with number 5. And then we moved to Wellington, where I practiced as a policy advisor and an IRD for 5 years. I was a solicitor for a couple of years, and for the last sort of 9 months as being a solicitor, I managed a team of accountants and lawyers who basically provided national determinations of how the commissioner would apply tax law.
Right.
And then was sent to the Beehive to work for Michael Woodhouse, Judith Collins. Stewie Nash came in 2017. Most amazing thing happened. Someone put a vacuum cleaner on the top of the Beehive, sucked out National, dropped in New Zealand. And I saw the staff and the Labour staff, they were just so reflective of our community. They were so diverse, and so I loved it. So switched to working at a political side, looking after Stuart Nash for 3 years. Ran for Labour as the MP for Mana, following after Chris Farfoy, who I'd met through community service. And the rest is pretty much history.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you couldn't write a bit of backstory, could you, Shane?
No, that's right. But
in terms of
Phil? No, you're right, Phil. But I haven't read the piece from the Post today. And
it's really
I
good.
think,
really good.
Yeah, I will. And then I think Barbara, it was a bit embarrassing because Barbara and I were having a chat yesterday, and someone said, "Shane, you should write a column about Barbara." And I said, "Yeah, I did 3 years ago, after her maiden speech, and it was just different. The background was different. Not only did story about a mum of 8 who has got some very serious qualifications, and her backstory just inspired me, but more so was just the articulate nature of it, and I just knew that Barbara will take some form of leadership role, whether it would be finance or whatever, sooner rather than later. Sometimes you just see it; it's right in front of you, and you pick it. It's not you don't have to have 101 political science or political science degree. You just know it when you see it, and I saw it.
Shane was first.
Well, some of us have just been spending our whole adult life saying, if you only picked a local for Mana, right?
Yeah.
Or Porirua as it was back then, good things will happen. Well, I would argue we're in the process of being proven right. That's some old bitterness going back.
Well, I'm still in Titeri Bay. I'm still here.
I know.
Where my kids are being brought up. So just to put that on the record.
And it really is a great city. I mean, I sincerely believe that 30,000 people, Shane, at Waitangi Day.
No, I get that, mate. But
in Porirua, it's diverse, but it's so cohesive.
Yeah.
Really strong iwi presence, but all the composite parts of the tapestry of Porirua are just seamless and quite. It gets better and better all the time.
Yeah.
And it's also not a bad seat from the point of view of proximity to Parliament. You don't have to travel a lot, I guess, which is
that's right.
A particularly good thing. But Barbara, finance. Did you have finance in mind from early on?
To be fair, and this might be really weird for a politician, I wanted just to be a good backbench MP. I loved my hood. I love Mana. I love Porirua, where I represent, and that was very genuinely the intention into going into Parliament, was to be a good advocate for our area. Obviously, where I have my specialty and my career and my background is tax, but I've been exposed to so many different things, having worked in the Beehive for different ministers. I did police. I worked on the firearms laws. We did cameras on fishing boats for fisheries. I've done small business policy for COVID stuff. So, when Chippy asked me last year, when he was divvying out the portfolios, what areas are you interested in? And I just said, look, my strengths are in that tax finance area, because that's what I've done for my career. And I said, just put me wherever you need me to go, because I can learn. You can learn this stuff. And Chippy tested with me then. He said, look, Grant's indicated, this was before the election, that it's likely to be his last term. We're going to be looking for someone, and I want you to have a serious think about taking that over when Grant leaves. So, I mean, that's quite scary, to be honest, be really frank. But, for me, it's not the technical side. I've done, I think over 10 budgets in my life as a public servant. So that stuff doesn't scare me. It's just that I have a different style of politics.
Yeah.
I'm not that usual adversarial, very cutting, that sort of thing. I'm a very technical. Well, the facts are the policy doesn't work, and here's the evidence that shows it. And that's my politics. And it's also, in some ways, culturally, we can be respectful and make a point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I was worried more about that side, but Chippy and Grant have their full confidence in me, And so when the announcement was made, just last week, and when Chippy rang me to ask, I was like, yeah, I'll do it for the team, And that's what you do. It's a big role, but I just have to step through it and do what I do with every challenge I've had, which is basically work through it considerately.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, sorry, Shane, you go ahead if you want to.
Oh, no, I was just saying that, first of all, I like Grant. I thought that he was a very good Minister of Finance. There's been a lot of crap over the last week from some of the right-wing media. And, I'll work on a bit of a column to try and put that right in a couple of weeks' time. But there is need for change after, him being the minister for 6 years and then Labour being outed in quite strong terms. That's not a criticism of Grant. That's just a reality of politics. And we just look at the hard facts of the matter as Barbara is the most qualified from a technical and from an experience sort of perspective. And I thought once Grant had made that decision, and, we all knew that it was coming. There was talk on the street that, he was looking, that he'd been sort of interviewed for quite a serious job down in Dunedin. So, I just think that it's just a natural succession plan that came into being. And I think Labour is fortunate because, Phil, you've been around a while. I've been around a while in the Labour Party. There have been times where you've had someone who's been in a particular position, particularly, say, finance, that's left, and there's been who next? Surely, who could it possibly be? But no, in this case, it was quite obvious.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Cullen left a bit of a vacuum, right?
Yeah, that's true. But actually, when Cullen was first appointed to the Minister of Finance, people actually laughed, didn't they? They thought it was hilarious, and
he's a social studies teacher trying to. I mean, this is the kind of nonsense. I mean, in fact, some of this pearl clutching, Barb, about Grant's decision, as if it was a shock, as if it's a death knell, as if it signifies something profoundly concerning about Labour and its prospects, just left me wondering: am I taking crazy pills, or someone? I mean, it was clear to me that the trajectory of his career was such that he'd done a very intense period of 2 terms. We're in opposition. He's moved on from the electorate of Wellington Central to move just to the list. The fact that he was his decision to move on and into a great role down in Otago felt surprising and unsurprising and completely fitting and appropriate. I didn't see it as anything more profoundly meaningful than that. And I think the way you have slipped into that role makes it even more seamless. And I think he did a good job, by the way, of doing his best to defend Labour's record against this hailstorm of, I would argue, misinformation about the fiscal legacy that Labour left behind, because it has been, I think, do you agree, the biggest focus of this government to date has been to attempt to define Labour's credibility in such a negative light that it effectively disqualifies the party and also justifies some of the harsh things are going to be enacted.
And the reason why they're doing that is because their own discredibility. The numbers didn't add up. Their fiscal plan, through economist after economist after economist, was basically saying this doesn't add up. So they've made really big promises and they're going to need to try and keep them. Nicola Willis during the election said, I'll stake my job, I'll resign if we don't deliver tax cuts. So they won it. So they get to rewrite history. But again, going back to my political style, you look at the facts. We have one of the lowest debt to GDP ratios in the world. The fact that the rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody, all give us strong debt ratings. And actually, during the COVID pandemic, we went up in one of those rating agencies. So that's really clear around our debt. So our debt is, okay, we're sound in our debt. Then you look at core crown expenses to GDP. So Treasury say to be sort of fiscally prudent, keep it around 30%. New Zealand is currently at 32%. However, we've had a pandemic and we've had two major disasters, both the Auckland floods and Cyclone Gabriel, just in that short period of time. So if you look at the way that the pre-election fiscal policy, you look at the budget policy statement the budget from last year, you can see there was a trajectory as, yes, our debt was climbing, but we were still meeting the revenue coming in, but it was going to tail off. And so there are really clear evidence bases which showed that we know there are big headwinds coming. We may need to do cost pressures more in the next budget, but actually we're not that bad when we compare ourselves to the rest of the world. Yeah, we could grow more, but we've had some really big challenges and climate change, those two big disasters that happened last year. So they're trying to rewrite that to basically help their script of why they won't be able to do things they wanted to do. So,
do you think they'll deliver that? Do you think that Nicola Willis will and Luxem will insist on the tax cuts?
Yep. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
whatever the consequences to elsewhere in the budget.
Well, because you look at the policies that they're unwinding at the moment, right? So you look at the current legislation they put through last week under urgency to the indexation of benefits back to CPI. Well, that's a $680 million return for them. You look at the smoke-free legislation, which they put through this year. It's a $1.5 billion revenue gain back for them, back into the books. So you're starting to look, you look at what they've done with affordable waters, 3 waters, basically they can claw back that money as well. So you're starting to see a lot of the policies they're doing is to save money for tax cuts. So they'll deliver the tax cuts, but there's going to be a big cost to it. And what I with Nicola in the House just on Wednesday around the smoke-free changes is that the long-term cost to our health system is $5 billion from those smoke-free changes. And she wants to bring in $1.5 billion. The cost-benefit analysis doesn't match up. So they're trying to rewrite the history to suit what their rhetoric is, which is we're the better fiscal managers, which they're not, and we want to do our tax cuts.
Yeah, can I? But Barbara gave a whole host of sort of figures at the beginning of the corridor just now about our economic position under Grant Robertson. But hey, I reckon the most important factor in terms of Ardern Robinson economic, social, and health delivery outcomes during the pandemic is that our life expectancy went up in Aotearoa, New Zealand, when most of the Western world it went down. And we know if we had taken on an alternative, Barbara, it would have been our people, Māori and Pacifica, that would have risen in the mortality rates. And so it comes down to that. But absolutely, the tax cuts are going to happen. It's going to benefit people like me that earn pretty decent money and that are a landlord. But the only other way that they can make it work from a dollar perspective is an austerity approach. And what we do know is, because we've had that in the 80s under Labour and in the 90s under National, what we do know is that that leads to things like generational unemployment. I think unemployment's going to hit nearly 6%, which means 8 to 9 in the regions and 12 to 13% amongst Pacifica and Māori, and that just has generational impact. And I can tell you what, if you want to grow the conditions where people lose hope, where they don't feel that there's anything for them in our society, you'll see the rise in gang numbers. You'll see the rise in crime. It's called cause and effect. It's nothing new. This isn't made up stuff that we don't know about. We know that realities of all of this.
Oh, I mean, the entire agenda is like a greatest hits album from the world's worst ever cover band, right? We've heard all of this stuff before, whether it's the beneficiary bashing, whether it's the trying to the attacks on iwi and the treaty. It's so tired. There's nothing. I can't identify a single new idea that they're trying to get across the line. It's all about discrediting Labor, disqualifying Labor based on this mythology, persistent mythology about fiscal management, and delivering for their base. Yeah. Barbara, are you surprised to the extent to which each successive policy isn't representing an attempt on the part of the Prime Minister and his ministers to broaden his coalition, but to really just deliver to his people at the expense of everyone else? It seems like a very intentional base placation strategy.
Yeah, and it's the coalition agreement is basically, what he's saying is kind of their Bible to it, right? But it's a corporate management type. These are your KPIs, and this is how we meet them. It's a tick box exercise, to placate the base of those people that supported them to get them to where they are. The issue is that I don't think they've, like what Shane was talking about, they haven't thought through the unintended consequences of this. Which is,
and I think that relates directly to that corporate short-term mentality. It feels like Luxon's in a hurry to get quick and easy policy wins that he can sort of present to the board. Yeah, as if to demonstrate, look, I'm doing. Whereas I just don't know whether politics is operating on that shorter time frame is going to deliver the kind of economy that New Zealanders want. Which brings me to that big picture question: what is a good economy, Barb? What does a good economy look like?
So it's got to run both ways, right? So we need to think about what is economics in the first place, right? It's the way that we distribute a really scarce resources. How do we make things, basically spread them as far and wide as we can with what we have? So what makes a good economy is, we need to invest responsibly, but without cutting back at the same time. So what I mean by investors, we have a huge infrastructure deficit. And that's why Labor set up an infrastructure commission, because nobody was looking long term. Nobody was saying, actually, this is what's happening in local government, this is what's happening in central government. How can we have a pipeline of certainty so that we can start to attract what we need to attract into New Zealand to fix some of those problems? Because, we don't have all the engineers and the road workers that we need to have.
Yeah.
So, you need to invest responsibly into what you need for your public assets. You can't just cut back for the sake of it, which is what we're seeing with the 6.5, 7.5 savings that they're trying to do. And we need to make sure that we spend the money on the things that we need. So it's, for me, the infrastructure issue is going to be massive. And I believe that because, we're struggling with housing. We've put, you look at Labor's last 6 years, the amount of investment into health infrastructure, housing infrastructure, roading, it surpasses what's been spent before. But those projects take time. You can't just give approval on day one and then you lay the tracks on day two. It takes a lot of engineering, consent process, planning process, and National kind of, they bat it away as just consultants in that. And it's like, no. You sometimes you need people to plan this stuff. That's what the experts do. So the other thing is we need to know how are we doing a good job. We need some indicators as to figure out, okay, the money that the government is spending, the scarce resources that we have and that we're trying to spread out, how do we know that we're delivering on what we're spending on? So you need to have some indicators for that. So that's another part of what Labor will need to really think about. And we've had some indicators before. We look at employment and wages, we look at GDP, you look at how much the private sector is investing. So a good economy for me, though, comes down to people. So you look through all the numbers, you look through all the infrastructure spend, you look through all the employment wages, GDP, and it comes down to people. And are people living a better life? And are we having a fairer society? So, sorry, that's a big answer.
But no, that's good. But one aspect you didn't mention, ironically enough, given your professional background, is tax. And
tax is part of it.
Yeah. And I'm not for a minute suggesting that you should, make any preemptive statements about where tax policy might end up, and demands that you or Chippy or anyone who happens to be asked a question by a journalist needs to somehow deliver this close to a election in the rear vision mirror, needs to start projecting forward to, it's just nonsense. It's nonsense. You've got time, but in the time that you have, how important do you think it is to look at that tax, take the lens out, have a look at the tax take, revisit how we approach work versus wealth, and so on?
It's not just the way that I'm looking at it. Like, our members are saying we need to look at this tax system, and that's why governments time and time again have had working groups saying, do we have a fair tax system? So there is a lot of pressure from within for us to basically look at the tax system. Is it operating as fairly as it should be? And, I'm not going to predicate the answer on it, but I'm pretty sure we all have a pretty, clear view on that one. So revenue is part of it, because revenue is the income coming in that we've got to be able to redistribute to help other people, right? Or help our economy. So it's going to be a really big part of what we take to 2026 is in like that whole revenue argument. Because basically looking at the books and how they look at the moment, both now HIFU, there's really big fiscal pressures coming. We look at super, what it's going to be as GDP in 26, it's going to be around 10%. Health is going to be around 7%. That's a big chunk of, New Zealand's taxpayer money is going to be spent on those two things, just on superannuation and health alone. You need to make those tough decisions very soon in order to make it sustainable for our kids.
Speaking of the tough, I've just got to mention this. I was doing a deep dive into Luxon's rhetorical style, because it just fascinates me. And during that State of the Nation speech, he used the word tough, the adjective tough, 10 times in the space of a relatively brief speech. And my original thought was, if you have to say tough 10 times in a speech, you are something other than tough, right? So that's like, it's the classic example of, it's like you use it twice, but 10 times? Like, that's some bad writing, even by his standards.
So I'm no economist or tax expert, and I don't tend to be, but I think I sort of got some observation that comes with being around a little while. And this is one of the observations that I've found, particularly in where I'm from, Kawerau, down in the Bay of Plenty. You take money out of the local economy through benefit cuts, through
minimum wage,
effective decreases. It kills the local economy. You give, and I always put it on my own shoulders. You give people like me tax breaks and give more money. We don't spend it locally, man. We might go on and further overseas holiday, or buy another rental property. It actually sucks money out of the economy. It doesn't put it into the economy, and I think we underestimate how important the circular economy is. You talk to, I was down in Hiritonga not that long ago, talking to someone who's been born and raised there, and they remember that one of the massive effects of Ruth Richardson's budget were, within a few months, the local shops just closed down, and it took 30 years to get them up and running again. So, I think that's...
Well, I represented Waitangi and Ascot Park on the Porirua City Council between 89 and 92. So just as that mother of all budgets was landing, and the consequences in real world terms to real people with genuine struggles, and all the full measure of humanity, deserving of dignity, just treated like trash in the service of some let's try and become the next Singapore, or whatever the nonsense idea they've cooked up between them. Sorry, Bob.
Sorry, can I just quickly say, here's the converse. In the 80s and 90s, I think we saw poverty like we've never seen before. We've still got it, but I just felt that we were slowly coming out of it. But also, man, we never saw wealth, extreme wealth at the high end, like we've seen before. And the reality is, another round of austerity, there will be more and more wealth. And it can be,
I mean, child poverty rates, any gain you make there will evaporate in a nanosecond without ongoing focus and commitment. We've seen that globally with the global poverty rates, but in New Zealand as well. These are very tenuous household economies, and even these minor changes, the finger wagging, pull your socks up, are you work ready? This kind of, and I'm going to say this, Barbara, because you're a Catholic too. The Protestant work ethic sort of ethos is poison, because it just drives these household economies into despair, and as you say, creates downstream effects that they then blame on the individuals themselves as well.
Phil,
and we're seeing all those elements.
Craig Renney's ready to come on.
Oh, is he? Well, I can't see him. He should be. There he is. There he is.
He's been waiting in the waiting room for you.
I do apologise, Craig. I didn't see you.
Craig.
You were below the line of. So, Craig, we've had a good chat, but now that you're on board, I want you to take over.
Okay. Well, it's been a really good chat. I don't know how much more time you have, Barbara. In terms of the right now, but I guess the one question I would ask you. So Phil's talked about what a good economy looks like. Is there one policy area or a couple of policy areas that you want to really talk to New Zealand about afresh in terms of economic policy, in terms of fiscal policy, in terms of things that you want to do and you want to talk to the country ahead of and its challenges in 2026?
Good question.
I do, but I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. Let me talk more generally, right? The conversations we need to have, or that our party is really pushing internally to have, is we want to have a good, strong fiscal plan into 2026, right, to take into the election. I have lost count now of how many people I've spoken to in the last week who have said to me, CGT or wealth tax, and it's maybe it's just because I've taken on the finance role, people feel like they need to tell me that this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
So it's that those drums are beating pretty strong. And I think the reason being is COVID showed us and showed every New Zealander the inequities in our society. It brought them right to the surface where people couldn't afford food, and when the government had to spend a lot of money on getting people to get out food packages, they just couldn't meet the basics. So that's obviously tax is one thing that's going to be a big discussion. Infrastructure and housing, massive. Housing is when I look back, housing is, it's the rent. You got to pay the rent first. You got to pay the mortgage first. You can be flexible with the food budget. You can eat jam and bread sandwiches for the rest of the week. It means you have a roof over your head. So we need to tackle that. And then for me, I mean, it's the reason why I came into Labour in the first place is just around the redistribution of income.
Yeah.
It is wages, employment, it is work, and it is around the money that people have in their hand at the end of the week. So those are some general sort of discussions that I've already had in just the week that I've been given this role, but it's something that we've been talking about for a number of years. And so, that's probably the best way I can put it without saying, without predisposing where we're going to get to as a party.
And if I could ask one follow-up question. So I worked with Grant Robertson for 5 years. I share all of your love for Grant and for his work. There's plenty of things that were done from the 2017 families package right through to the response to COVID, to making sure that we were consistently investing in schools and hospitals, all the things that were neglected for too long. Grant is still not my favorite politician. My favourite politician is Clement Attlee.
Okay.
In the UK. Clement Attlee took the UK 1945 after the Second World War, and he created the NHS. He created secondary education. He created state housing. He created a welfare state. He's the person I look to when I look to what change looks like in an economy. Who is the politician you look at and say, that's the change I want to see in the economy?
Great question.
Oh, it's got to be MJS, right? Michael Joseph Savage, for me. And again, I have been the beneficiary of his policies as a child. With my dad, like you missed it earlier, but when my dad was working through his grief and wanted to make sure that we were supported as kids, it was the unemployment benefit. So though is that welfare state that he provided safety nets for children like me, so that we could be caught when things happened in our lives that were out of our control. So, I have to go back to that, to Michael Joseph Savage. But I've had the ability to work with Grant, Jacinda, Chris Hipkins, Calvin Davis. They've been the politicians I've worked quite closely with, and even Stewie Nash and Kitty. I've worked with them in the last few years, but for that question, it's definitely Michael Joseph Savage because, he's basically made sure as a kid that I could become a tax lawyer, even though I grew up on a benefit-dependent household.
Yeah, that's drawing a wonderful through line from the policy accomplishments of past Labor governments right through into your life and something. I mean, that's something I think we undersell on the Labor side. I think we need to talk about those things more, and I'm so gratified to hear you talk about that, because you know what, as a lot of the financially well-off critics of Labor seem to share the problem that the former Texas Governor Ann Richards said about George H.W. Bush, which was he was born on third base and he thought he hit a triple, right? In other words, didn't see the legacy, didn't see the work, the sacrifice, the contributions, the vision of people that came before that have laid the path for one's own success. And the inability to see that I find very galling, but it's common. It's everywhere.
Well, you think about what's their legacy policy over the times that they've been in government. And I look at Labor, working for families, the welfare state houses, KiwiSaver, winter energy payment. These are progressive policies that are like, National isn't going to undo working for families. They're not going to undo winter energy payment. Well, if they do, gosh, they're up for a big fight. These are the core Labor policies that have lasted through the last 100 years and are still here.
Yeah, well, you could add public schools and hospitals, by the way. I mean, you could go back as, that wasn't there. Yeah, that we make the reforms, they sort of underfund but tolerate them until things run down to such a degree that Labor comes back in to sort of rescue
Comes back in and has to fix them.
Yeah, exactly. Craig, you were about to say something?
Oh, just sort of, the National Party's never met, its key policy is a tax cut. The National Party's never met a tax cut it doesn't like. If the economy is not doing so well, have a tax cut. If the economy is doing fantastically, have a tax cut. If the economy is just sort of middling along, have you tried a tax cut? Their policy is actually just simply to justify whatever they're doing to deliver that change. They don't have a purpose in the same way as I would argue the Labour Party does, and its great value, which is that actually it's there to deliver for its community, for workers right around New Zealand, for those on low incomes, for those who don't have the ability to, necessarily otherwise look after themselves. And, I think, Barbara, with the opportunity that's in front of you, building on the work of the sixth Labour government, where do you see what's the greatest point of damage right now from this incoming government? Is there one thing that you think, if you could stop it today, it would be this?
It would have been FPAs, fair pay agreements. The ability for our lowest paid sectors, such as bus drivers, security cleaners, they actually had a real ability to do, there's something tangible that could be done to help them get up a bit more, but they took it away so quickly. And I know the business sector, does not like FPAs. We just have to find a way to make it work, but they hadn't really given it a chance yet. But, we have, I know so many Pacific and Māori families that have gone to Australia for better wages. And it's like, wow, they've got better wages because of this. And by the way, we have a similar thing called an FPA here in New Zealand, There's a reason why they're going there. It's because the work that they do, which is in the sort of more hands-on manufacturing sectors and industries, they get better pay over there because they've got better rights over there.
They've also got coast-to-coast state Labor governments and have had pretty much, in the major population centres consistently for the last 10 or 15 years. So none of this is accidental. This is the product of government action. Wouldn't look the same if the National Party's sort of equivalent, which is the Libs, the Liberal Party in Australia, if they'd been in office in every major state in Australia for the last 10 years, it wouldn't look the same. It just wouldn't. I say that as a former ALP staffer, so I'm a little bit biased. But again, it's the product of public policy. It's not an accident. That Australian workers enjoy better wages and conditions. It's the product of advocacy, action, politics, hard decisions, and getting the business community to see, as they invariably have, that empowering workers and lifting up the dignity of work is a win-win for everyone.
For everyone.
Yeah.
Even the Kiwis who are going. But
yeah.
Unfortunately, I need to go because I need to go and pick my son up, who will otherwise be left at a school somewhere. This is
you added your short cameo, which was my fault. I apologise. You were too low on the screen. I didn't see you. I thought you'd pop up in a different part of the
story of my life.
Your cameo, I have to say, was timely and superb, and your headphone microphone setup is golden. So thank you, Craig.
That's right.
And thank you, Barb, for being so generous with your time. We're delighted that you came on so early in your tenure. I've never known an appointment to be met with such uniform celebration as yours within Labor circles. You've won over you've got a lot of fans within your caucus, outside the caucus, among party activists, wherever I speak to them. So there's a lot of excitement and anticipation. But and I've waited till the end to mention that you are the mother of 8 children. And in my way of looking at things, you've got a problem, give it to the mother of 8 children, and it will be fixed.
I'll try my best. My best.
On that basis, I'm full of confidence and best wishes for everything that comes ahead. And I hope we can talk once the policy contours start to fill out. Please come back and talk, because we like to have deeper conversations here. And all the best with the new role. And thank you once again. Whaftai lava. And I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Lovely. Thanks, Phil. And we'll definitely speak again soon.
Thanks. See you later. Tofa.